as I said, long awaited for this webinar and the forms. Again, they're not quite ready, but they're ready enough that I can demonstrate to you today what they look like and how they work, and they are going into the production server, which means that we all will be able to use them very soon, hopefully by next week. So how to enter data into SWIMS. First, I wanted to explain to people who don't know what SWIMS stands for. It is the Surface Water Integrated Monitoring System. It is the DNR's, the Department of Natural Resources, online water resources database. So this database is used by biologists as well as volunteers in the Lakes, Volunteer Lakes Program, Wetlands, Aquatic Invasive Species, and the STREAMS program. So it is the database that stores water quality data. There are a couple others as well that I'll talk very briefly about. One of the things we wanted you to understand about the SWIMS database, and one of the reasons we're trying to bring together the program and not have multiple databases in use, is that data that go into SWIMS don't just sit there. So this screen that's being shown is showing a list of data that are available for one site that Jeannie Shear, I need to give credit to, made the bulk of this presentation. So Jeannie looked up one site at Battle Creek at County BB, and she wanted to use it as a demo of what happens with data that are in this SWIMS database. So here we have the SWIMS database is one of kind of three main databases that are used in the Department of Natural Resources. There's a fish management database used by the fisheries staff for fish surveys and habitat surveys and whatnot. There's the SWIMS database. Again, it's got water quality data, and it's used by this long list of different kinds of groups and information. And then there's something called the waters database. So that's where there's actually decisions being made, but the databases are connected, and the waters database pulls data from SWIMS in order for the staff to make decisions about impaired waters, for instance. The other cool thing about the SWIMS database is it's actually linked to two web-based databases or sources that you all can go to, one of which is called the Surface Water Data Viewer, and the other is the Department of Natural Resources website. And the data that you enter from your stream sites are then available either through this mapping system, the Surface Water Data Viewer, or through web pages. And that includes photos. So if you were taking photos and uploading those to the SWIMS database, then the website actually will scroll through and pull random photos that people have put into the SWIMS database over time and put them on the DNR's website. So if you were to look up in the Surface Water Data Viewer, your site, so up in the top right, this number 100299971, that's the number that indicates Battle Creek at BB. If you were to look up that site in the Surface Water Data Viewer, then what would happen is you can actually choose to link to monitoring data, which is shown over on the left side circled in red. And what you find is you can actually observe whatever data have been collected. And this happens to be Richard Schlondrop's Battle Creek site data. You can use the drop-down list to choose the different parameters that have been monitored and see the different data that are available. I'll also mention, I don't have a slide for it, but one of the things that we'll be able to do, and we've been able to do for our level 2 volunteers over time, is download site reports at the end of the year that give you graphs and information about the data that you found over time, as well as interpretation information. So what does that temperature mean for fish or for macroinvertebrates, or what does pH mean, or other parameters that you're monitoring. So at the end of the year, we have a student employee who will go through in the SWIMS database and generate those reports. You all can do it yourselves as well. We usually have directions posted on the website, or if you wait for the student, she will or he will do the generating of those reports, and we will post them on our website, and it's a map-based system, so you can go to your county and then you can find the list of stations that are monitored in that county and you can open your report. That's available on our website now for our level 2 sites that have been monitored over time already. Then the other thing is in terms of a linkage between the SWIMS database and the DNR's web page. So one thing you can do, this web address in red is where you can go to search for a water body. So in this case, we searched for Battle Creek, and this page came up after we went to that page. And you can choose to click on Monitoring and Projects that's circled there in blue. When you do that, you will have the option to look at a map of where the site is or look at the data. So if you click on that down on the lower right, if you clicked on the link for data, that same list of data would appear. So it's just a couple different ways of getting at the information that's included in the SWIMS database. So your data are going to be available to any public person who has web access worldwide. So in terms of entering your data, how do you get there? So we have the WAVE website, the Water Action Volunteers, watermonitoring.uwex.edu/WAVE. And so if you go to this homepage for WAVE, if you choose in the quick links, the database link, you will be brought to a page that contains information like this. One of the things that we've been trying to get people set up to do, and if you are new to the database or the program, you may not have done this yet, you need to first register to use the database by obtaining something called a WAMS ID, or Wisconsin Access Management System ID. In the very top section of what you're seeing here, the registering to use the database, there are directions that you can download as a PDF file, and it will take you step by step through what you need to do and where you need to go, which website you need to go to obtain this WAMS ID, and then what you need to do to tell us, the WAVE staff, what your ID is and which stations you're monitoring. There's also information on this page about how to request a monitoring station. So if you're somebody new to the program and you're starting to monitor a new site, you need to let us know where that is. And so there are directions where this hand is pointing at to explain to you how to register your site and how to let us know where you're monitoring. Okay. So then the next thing would be entering results. It's the fourth section down here, and there's a link there to access the SWIMS database. You can also, on that same page, this is the same page just at the top, there's also a link at the top left for entering the database. So either way, down the page or up on the top left, you can get there into the SWIMS database. You can also use a direct link, which is written here on the top of the page, this HTTPS. If you want to bookmark something on your computer, that would be the address that you would want to bookmark to directly get to the SWIMS database. And what you'll see in general is a page like you're being shown here with the Devil's Lake picture. And on the right, your user ID, that's that WAMS ID that you would have to have applied for, and the password that you have chosen when you registered for your WAMS ID. So you'll enter those in the top right and click on Sign In. A couple things that Jeannie wanted you to know about if you have trouble signing in. What happens if your WAMS ID and password don't work? So a couple things could happen. One is that the user ID, your WAMS ID, is not case sensitive, so don't worry about that. You can write it in capitals or small letters, but you do need to remember that your password is case sensitive. So first thing you should do is make sure you typed it correctly, make sure you don't have the caps lock button on, or you didn't accidentally hit shift for too long if you have a capital or whatnot. So make sure you typed it correctly. If that doesn't work, then you should contact the WAVE staff. So either me or Lindsay Albright are your two primary folks to reach out to. We do have a student working with us this summer too. As we get going, we'll get her trained to help as well. But for now, Lindsay and I are your people. So what we want to do is make sure that you have a SWIMS profile. So you will need to let us know your name, your contact information, that WAMS ID that you had just registered for, and whatever monitoring site or sites you are doing. So we can link your WAMS ID with those sites. It's possible that some of you might have WAMS IDs from the past. If you had a private business or something like that, a lot of people, anything within the state, you could have a WAMS ID. So if it has been a while since you've used that WAMS ID, it might need to be reactivated. And if that's the case, then you should go to this website and choose account recovery and follow the directions there. It's somebody, not us, who deals with helping people reset their WAMS IDs. It's also possible that if you long ago had a business or some other reason to have had a WAMS ID and haven't used it, that your ID might have been retired. If that's the case, you want to go back to the same web address, and you want to click on Help Wisconsin Support at the very bottom, and then email them what problem you're having, and also give them your phone number, because apparently they like to call and actually work with you one-on-one to try to figure out the issue. So hopefully with all these tips you will be able to get into the SWIMS database. You click top. Hey Janice, could you help Lindsay be able to talk? She's going to try to jump in and share some information.
Sure, Lindsay, just click the talk button.
She did.
Okay, well, I'm going to put my office phone number in here in the chat box, and Lindsay, you can call me and we'll work this out offline, okay?
Sounds great. Okay. So when you actually log into the SWIMS database, thinking back, you entered your WAMS ID and your password. This is what your screen will most likely look like. There's one exception to that. So if your screen looks like this, what you'll be doing is choosing whichever station you want to enter data for and choosing to enter new field results. The exception to this is if you happen to be somebody who is a lake monitor. If you are a lake monitor, you'll have a screen that looks like this. It allows you to still enter and edit data. You just have a little bit of a different view in how to go about choosing to enter or edit your data. So in this case, you'd choose to enter your data on the far left of whatever station you were interested in. But for most people, we're going to go back to this usual screen. So again, you're going to choose whichever station you have data to enter. You're going to choose to enter new field results. You can also do a second option. There's a couple different ways of getting to things. So an optional method would be to look at the tabs at the very top, and there is a Submit Data tab, the third from the left, that you could select. If you did that, what you'd see then is something like this, and then you would choose to add new data and move on to the same screen you would get to had you chosen enter new field results on the screen. So what you end up with is a form that looks like this. It has the station that you have chosen, and if you have more than one station and you happen to pick the wrong one, over on the far right you have a drop down. You can actually pick whichever other stations you might want to enter data for. And we'll show you a live version of this after this PowerPoint, so we can show you how it works. You'd enter your name, whoever was with you. You want to make sure that you're entering the whole group. So if you don't see an entire group, Lindsay or I can help you set up groups for making sure that we have your whole team recognized when you've done the monitoring. So basically, this should follow your data form. You'll enter what date and what time you did your monitoring. You want to make sure that the form is the Wave Stream Monitoring 2015, and the end date and time will autofill, so just double check that it didn't put in something really strange on you. And if you know the end time, then or approximate end time, that's great. It helps us to understand how long it takes people to do their monitoring. If you have any comments about the stream site, then you can go ahead and enter those in that large comments box. Once you've done this, you can click Next. You can also click Save. If you click Save, it just saves it and you're still looking at what you typed. If you click Next, the SWIMS database actually automatically saves for you, so don't worry if you don't remember to click Save, because it's going to do it for you anyway. So you click Next. If you have some troubleshooting tips, Double check that the AM and PM on the time have registered correctly, because when it autofills, it might put in 2 a.m. or something like that, so we would be suspicious if you were out there at 2 a.m. And concerned for your safety as well. And if you click Save instead of Next, don't worry about it. Again, that your work's going to be saved. If you happen to click Save and Return, what it ends up doing is sending you back out to a list of stations. And to get yourself back in, you can click on the small pencil that's here circled in red. There's a little magnifying glass, a pencil next to it. So that will put you back to where you were. If you accidentally hit Enter, that's the same thing as hitting Save and Return. So again, you're going to come back with that same list we just saw and just click on the little pencil. It will get you back into your data form. I just mentioned it, that if you click Next, the database will automatically save for you, so that's good. And then if you happen to be somebody who's collecting, say, a phosphorus sample or a chloride sample, what SWIMS does is lumps all the data from the same date and time and place. So it's going to know how to put those together based on your station ID and sometimes what's called a lab slip number. If you have any troubles, you can always be in touch with Lindsay or I, and we'll try to help you through. Okay, so what we did, we have one form. It's the Wave Stream the Wave Stream Monitoring Form 2015. There's actually 5 different screens or 6 different screens of it. So I'll go through each of them. But just to give you a summary, the first one is your general information. What was the weather? Did you go out on your primary safety or other monitoring date? And that's for our level 2 monitors. We ask folks in that program to choose their dates in advance so that they aren't biasing and only going on very nice days. And so their primary date would be the pre-chosen date. A safety would be if there was a thunderstorm or a tornado or some flood or something that made it not possible to sample on that primary date. And then other might be if you had a grandchild in town and you wanted to go out and do monitoring while they were in town. That might be an other reason. Could be any infinite number of other options as well. But it's the basics. It's your air and water temperatures, dissolved oxygen, your pH if you do that, transparency, tubes, and if you happen to be somebody who's doing road salt and total phosphorus, there's some information there as well. The second page is for stream flow, which will include all your observations for depth and width and velocity, and it will do the calculation for you. There's also a section on that page that's if you happen to be somebody who's using meters for oxygen, pH, or specific conductance. We have a section there asking you about if you calibrated those meters. The third page would be only for people if they have thermistors, continuous temperature monitoring devices at their site. And if you don't, we will teach you how to just skip that page. The fourth page would be if you are doing the biotic index or looking for aquatic invasive species. And then the fifth and actually sixth pages are for habitat assessment. There's one page each for the narrow streams less than 10 meters and for the wider streams greater than 10 meters in width. So let me show you what these pages look like. So here's your first page of data entry. So again, just the general, the weather, the different basic observations about air temperature, water temperature, oxygen. So the neat thing is for transparency, you'll enter your 2 trials, your 2 readings for transparency, and if you click Save, the database automatically will calculate that average for you. That bottom section that mentions specific conductance and chloride and the total phosphorus, that's only, don't worry about that. If you do not collect those types of data, don't worry about it. Just leave them as is, leave them blank. And if you are somebody who happens to collect them and you happen to collect a sample that went to the lab, here's where you would have that option to enter that pointer outfall number. When you're ready to go to the next screen, if you are somebody who's doing those kinds of monitoring for something going to the lab, your pointer outfall number on your lab slip that goes off to the lab is located about midway down on the right, as circled in the purple here. So to move to the next page, you can click on Save and Next.
And something to keep in mind with that point and outfall number, that lab slip is associated with samples that are being sent to the State Lab of Hygiene. For those of you who are doing phosphorus monitoring or any other parameters that are sending your samples to a different lab, you don't need to be writing that point and outfall number because you won't be having that. So this is if you're sending samples to the state lab using a lab slip that looks like this on the screen.
Okay, so you're clicking on Save and Next to go to the next page of the form, and pretty much every time. So here's the first half of the StreamFlow page. And again, what is going to happen is the database is asking you to enter all the observations you make if you're measuring StreamFlow. So at the very top, it actually asks you a couple extra questions. It wants to know, is StreamFlow monitored? Yes or no? And it wants to know if, what was the method? Did you use a meter or did you use the wave float method? We are assuming that 99.5% of you are using the wave float method, but if you happen to be somebody who used a meter, then the next line down provides you an option for entering your actual StreamFlow result if you used a flow meter. If you did not, then what you'll do is you will enter your length assessed, your stream width, and then all your depth observations. One thing to remember is that first measurement point, that first interval, that first measurement point of depth should always be 0. Please, please, please. Okay, and here's the bottom half of the StreamFlow page. So anything that's highlighted in gray on these forms are fields that will be calculated by the database when you push the Save button. So in this case, the first section is looking at the total sum of depths, the number of intervals, the average depth, and the determination of the cross-sectional area. You can push Save at any point in time after you've entered data in one section, and it will calculate for that section, or you can wait until you've entered all the data on the page and then push Save, and it will do the calculations at that point. It doesn't matter which way you choose. You will have to choose the velocity correction factor, and a reminder to folks, that's either 0.8 if you have a rocky or rough bottom, or 0.9 if you have a smooth bottom stream. And then the very last part here is again not about StreamFlow. We just tossed it on the bottom of this page. Is asking if you happen to be somebody who's doing monitoring using a dissolved oxygen meter, a pH meter, or a specific conductance meter. The question here is just a drop down yes or no. Did you calibrate the meter? Which we hope you always say yes. And again, like before, when you're finished entering these results, again you can click Save to do the calculations. Save and Next will bring you to the next screen. So this is the thermistor page. If you are somebody who doesn't have a thermistor, which would be new volunteers or folks who haven't decided to step up to the next level of taking that on in the second year, or just are not using one, we may not have enough for everybody. You can skip this page simply by clicking on Save and Next. So just don't enter anything, go to Save and Next. If you are somebody who is using a thermistor, we're looking for you to enter information about that thermistor. The serial number, the type, it's generally it's the tidbits most folks have. What are you doing? Are you deploying the thermistor, or are you doing your monthly check to make sure that it's immersed in the water? And you will write down, if in this case it was a test for deployment, so you make sure you write down the time and very specific information about where you put it. These things are easy to lose, and oftentimes we find that we put them in and then we think we put it right next to that tree, and we were really a little farther away from that tree than we thought. So they're tricky to find if you don't be explicit about where you put it. So this is something you can also go back to if you forget at the end of the time period that it's being put in. You can go back here and look and see what you wrote if you don't have your data sheets. So once you've entered that, you'll click Save and Next, and this is the biotic index page. So for those people who do monitor biotic index, You would do it again twice a year, spring and fall. If you don't, you can simply click on Save and Next and skip the whole page. If you do, what you'll need to do for each organism listed, if you found it, if you observed it, you want to click on the arrow and choose the word present. So we leave it blank if it wasn't observed, and choose present if it was observed. If you want to click Save after each group, group 1, 2, 3, and 4, the database in that gray fields will calculate the number of animals observed in each group, and that's just presence or absence. It's not actually like I saw 12 stoneflies. It's did you see stoneflies, damselflies, alderflies, and or water snipeflies. So it will be a number between 0 and 4 for group 1, for instance. But you can also wait and just enter all those organisms that you observed present and click Save at the end, and the database will go through. It will calculate the sums for each of the groups, and it will calculate the total biotic index score at the very bottom right. If you did find an aquatic invasive species, this is the very bottom of that form. And we are asking people this year when they're doing their biotic index monitoring to look for rusty crayfish, Asian clams, and New Zealand mud snails. So if you happen to find suspects of any of these and collected them and submitted them to DNR, this is where we would like you to answer. Just the drop down here is just a yes or no if you had submitted some to DNR for positive ID. Once you're finished with that, you can click Save and Next. And then the last two forms are the habitat assessment forms. So the first one that will show up is for the streams that have average widths less than 10 meters. And I circled that up on the left so you can see where you're looking to see which form it is. And then the top half of this screen shows the SWIMS form. The bottom image that shows rating excellent, good, fair, and poor, that's actually a capture from a piece of your data sheet that you'll have in the field with you. And what I want you to observe on here is that for each question, you're going to be circling if it was excellent, good, fair, or poor, and the score associated with that for the less than 10 meter wide streams is going to be 15, 10, 5, or 0 for this question. They'll vary question to question. But what will be in the drop-downs on the SWIMS form, if you click the little arrow under result on the SWIMS form, you're going to have options just for the numeric numbers, 0, 5, 10, or 15. And just a warning is that SWIMS has a database mind, and so those numbers might not be in the order you expect them to be. So be very careful when selecting the numbers of the score you circled to make sure that you actually circled the number that it's showing. They don't show up in the right order. And I'll show you that when we go to the live version. If you had a stream that was more than 10 meters wide, this is the next screen that will show up if you had clicked Save and Next. And here's the greater than 10 meters, and the same thing here. Your drop-down menu for the different choices will be just a numeric, just a number, and in this case it's 12840. So once you have entered results here, or if you don't have results to enter here, you can click Save and Return to List, and that will bring you back to your list of stations. And here's just an example of what you might see, where you have different dates of where you went out and did field work and for whatever project. Yours will look different. It will be unique to whatever stations you have in your collection that are linked to you. If you want to see the results, you can click on the magnifying glass on the far, far left of any of the rows and see what results you had entered. So a couple tips if you're going to edit data. This would be if you realize you made a mistake or you forgot to do something. One of the things is from your fieldwork list, which is going to be that image we just saw, you want to make sure that you choose the right site and the right date, because they're going to look similar, and it might be you went out both on August 8th and September 8th, and just make sure you're choosing the right date that you're to edit. If there is not a little pencil let's see, I'll go back one screen here. In this case, there's a little pencil just to the right of the little magnifying glass on the far left of each row. If no pencil is showing up, that means that you aren't able to edit those data. So one reason that might happen is if you had submitted a sample to the State Lab of Hygiene, any information that comes into the SWIMS database from the State Lab of Hygiene, you are not able to edit. So if there's an issue, let somebody from the WAVE staff know, and we can help you figure things out. So once you've done it, then you're done, and this is your sample data entry. If you were to click on the little magnifying glass, this is what you'd see. Over kind of on the right, it says field results, and it shows all the data that you had entered for those field results. So I think we should be able to do a live demo. Janice, do you agree that I should be able to show my screen to folks and run through this once live?
We can, but I'm going to warn you that there may be some sluggishness in the screen redraw. So if you can minimize flipping back and forth, or just kind of be slow as you do this, I think we'll be okay.
Okay, sure, for sure.
All right, so to do that, look at the top of your screen, Chris, and you see the pencil on the whiteboard. It's the screen to the right of that is your application sharing.
Okay.
While that's loading, Chris, we've had a question come in about notes in the biotic index section. Where, if anybody had any comments or anything that they would want to make about the macroinvertebrates, where should they be recording those?
Great. So I think people heard Lindsay say that people had a question about if you had comments about the macroinvertebrates, where should you record those? I would actually record those on the very first page where you have stream side observations. So that you'll want to put those comments in right away, or go back in and edit and add those comments right at that very first screen. Okay. So, all right. I believe that you are seeing the form.
Yes, we're seeing it.
Okay. So, just one second, because I got logged out while we were talking. I'm going to log back in. Okay, so here we are live, and in this case I'm going to choose this Allen Creek site upstream from Church Street Bridge in Evansville, and I want to choose to enter new field results. Once I did that, it automatically went to the screen that you should be seeing now. So you can see that the Allen Creek site is what's been selected. The data collectors, in this case, it's a demo server, so we have James and Jack, our data collectors. And we are at this Pleasant Prairie Bridge station. So I'm required to enter anything that has an asterisk next to it. So I'm going to pretend that I went out on June 1st, and I went at 2 o'clock. And here's one thing again, remember you check the AM and PM. It automatically goes to AM, so I was not out there at 2 a.m. I have the correct form, the WAVE Stream Monitoring 2015 form, and then I ended my monitoring on June 1st at 3 o'clock p.m. Stream side observations. I may have spelled that wrong. Saw raccoon. Water levels are high. So whatever observations you might have seen, you can enter there. Again, I could push save, or I can just push next and move to the next screen. In this case, we got our weather So we're going to say that it was partly sunny. And notice here, this is, again, the SWIMS thing. The list of options for weather is listed alphabetically, so it's a little bit different order than what's going to show up on your data sheet because that's not alphabetical. The sampling date in this case, this was my primary, and the weather over the past 2 days was rain. Your current stream conditions, we have everything from dry, flooding, frozen, normal, other, stagnant. I think I said there was high water, so we're going to say it's flooding. Maybe it's, well, let's not say it's flooding. We're going to call it normal, even though it's water level is high. But it's fairly normal. It's not flooding, so it's not dangerous. Current student size observations, if you had other information to add besides the comments from before, you could put them here or you could leave it blank. Air temperature in degrees Celsius. It was a lovely 70-degree Fahrenheit day, or 21 Celsius. Our water temperature was something a bit warm. For dissolved oxygen, so we have some folks in the program using hotkits, some using Lamotte, some using YSI 550 meters, and other we added just in case there's somebody out there doing something different. So many of the people will use hotkits. We have a milligrams per liter of oxygen. Our percent saturation, I am actually making up because I didn't have actual data, so that might not be real, but this is, second row here is going to get deleted. That's a development server error, so we'll ignore that. I didn't monitor pH. Your choices for transparency tube length, 100, 120, or 60 centimeters. So most of you will recognize if you have a 120 centimeter tube, it's probably a couple centimeters longer than that in most cases. Please just go with 120 if it's 122 centimeter tube with a few extra centimeters. We just want it to be simple with our 3 options. And wanted to be able to recognize if somebody said that they have a 100 centimeter tube and they only entered 100 centimeters of transparency, it's not that it's a little bit cloudy and they have a 120 centimeter tube, it's that they only can read to 100 centimeters. So that's why we ask you the length. So in my case, on this particular day, I had a 120 and a 100 centimeter observation. So I'll demonstrate. If I click on the Save button, it should calculate an average of 110, which it did. I didn't monitor the specific conductance or total phosphorus, so I will skip those. And by clicking on Save and Next, I will get to the next screen, that streamflow screen. So in this case, again, with streamflow monitored, I'm going to say yes. And for today,
Can you pause?
Sure.
Can you pause briefly? Clicking on that, people are not able to see the drop down. It's just a black screen for all of us.
We're not.
So can you say?
We're not going to be able.
What it shows.
Yeah, it's not going to help her to pause because that little screen is perceived as not being part of the browser. That's why it's being shown. So we just have to. I don't think we're going to be able to see that. Just
any of the drop-downs?
Any of the drop-downs just show up as little black boxes.
Oh, okay. So apologies, folks, that those are not coming through. Okay, so I will spend less time telling you what's in the drop-downs, and I'll just enter some results. You can see if I enter results, though, like if I put in a 20, does that actually show up?
Yes.
Okay. Correct. Okay. So I'm going to enter some numbers in here. First observation, always 0.
Hi, Kate. Yes, I am. Okay. Yep, that would be just fine. You're wonderful. Okay, thank you, Kate. Bye.
And we're almost got all the observations in for depth. So what I can do, if I click Save, it should auto-calculate our total sum of depths. The number of intervals was 20. the average depth 0.67, and the cross-sectional area of 30 square feet. For our float trials, I'll put in our 4 observations of float trials. And again, if I click Save, it will recalculate, and I'll scroll back down so I can see my sum of float trials. The number of float trials was 4, the float time average, and the average surface velocity. In this case, we had a rocky bottom stream, so if I click Save again, and again, you do not have to click Save every single time. You could do it all at the end, so I'm just doing it to show you as it calculates. So in this case, we have a corrected surface velocity. We have a calculated stream flow of 16.3 cubic feet per second. And then what we did is we took the work that I had done with a number of the volunteers from WAVE a few years back, where we determined that the WAVE float method overestimates stream flow by about 24%. We actually have an equation that we can use from that research to correct our stream flow. So here, this 12.4 cubic feet per second is the corrected stream flow based on that research. So that's for stream flow. If you were using a meter for pH or dissolved oxygen, you just click yes or no for if there was a calibrated. So that's tossed on the end of the stream flow page. Once you're moving to the next page, you go to Save and Next. Again, if you don't have a thermistor, go ahead and skip this screen. We'll pretend that I didn't have a thermistor. And then we're on to the biotic index page. As explained before, your results drop down. The only option here is present. So if you didn't see it, just leave it the way that it is. If you did observe that organism, go ahead and click as if it's present. I'll pick a few. And then you can click on Save to do the calculation. So we can see that group 1, we observed 1, group 2, 4, group 3, 1, and group 4, 0. And it goes through the calculation and it ultimately ends up with a biotic index score of 3. And then at the very bottom, again, did you observe any potential rusty crayfish, Asian clams, or New Zealand mud snails? It's a yes or no drop down for those. So if you did, you can click yes. I'm going to click no for all 3. And I clicked on Save and Next. So now I'm on to the habitat assessment. So you won't be able to see it because it is the drop down, but in this case, my first option for repairing buffer width, the way that it shows up, the options show up as 0, 10, 15, and 5. And that's because the database thinks that the 1 in the 10 and the 15 are smaller than the 5. So again, just be very careful about what you're selecting from the drop down for your scores for the habitat assessment. I'm going to just pick some numbers as I go through. Pretend that I did this. And when you click on Save, it calculates it as a score of 75. And your data sheet has an explanation. It's more like a grade like we talked about on a webinar a few weeks ago for those who were there. So in this case, the score of 75 is, I think, good or fair. I don't remember how the numbers pan out. But you could look at your data sheet to see what that means for water quality. So in this case, I could just click on Save and Return to List, because now that I've entered my habitat assessment for less than 10 meters, I know that I don't have a habitat assessment for a stream width more than 10 meters. But just so you can do the screen, I'm going to go to Save and Next and show you that screen so you can see it. So here's your various questions, and again, your drop-down results of just the water, or the scores, the numeric scores. So at this point, you would click on Save and Return to List. And here's the data summary that will show up. You click on you can edit by clicking on the pencil. You can look at data by clicking on the magnifying glass. So since this is a sample database, we're seeing all kinds of data that have been entered over time. So with that, I would be happy to answer questions. I know Lindsay's been taking questions over time that have appeared. Lindsay, are there some that we need to address that you have not had a chance to answer?
I am answering the last one that has just popped in about, and Chris, you might, as far as I know, the thermistor number, the serial number, is not going to be remembered from data entry periods between the two of them, correct? Is that number will have to be re-entered every single time you log in and start doing the data entry process?
Yep, that's correct. You're going to have to enter that each time. Are there any other questions that folks have not had a chance to type into the chat box? I'm not sure if I can answer your question, Joe. Does the historical dissolved oxygen form reproduce the nomogram in standard limnology text? So can you add to that question? I'm not sure if I understand what you're asking. Okay, I've got a couple other questions. Well, Joe is going to, if he can add to his. So let's see. Molly is making sure folks know that if you did not collect data for a field, don't type in a 0. That's very, 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 very important. Please leave it blank. If you put in 0, the database thinks that it was 0. So if you didn't monitor temperature and you put in 0, the database thinks it was 0 degrees Celsius that day. So excellent point. Thank you, Molly, for pointing that out. If you didn't do it, just skip that question altogether. Leave it blank exactly how it is set up that way. Ken asks, we're doing level 1 at one location and total phosphorus at another. Do I need to use the sim page for total phosphorus? So no. So in general, you do not need to enter any information into SWIMS for total phosphorus. I have one exception to that rule, and that is somebody this morning was telling me when they were at their site that there was very, very high water, very turbid water when they monitored, and there isn't a place on the lab slip to enter that information. So if that was the case and you had some kind of a interesting or anomalous kind of stream-side observation that you wanted to share, in that case I would contact Lindsay and have her give you that station into your station list, and then you could just put in stream-side observations and your pointer outfall number, and then it would link back your observations to that information. But in general, you don't have to enter anything into SWIMS for your total phosphorus. Next question, will the state lab be entering data for the 2 nutrient samples that we've collected and dropped off? Yes. So anything that you submit to the State Lab of Hygiene, they enter, and those data go directly into the SWIMS database. So yes, that will happen. And then Lindsay will let folks know if you're monitoring for her or for WAVE-funded projects. Lindsay will let you know in the Google Drive file when the results are available. She'll enter those results into the Google Drive file.
And those results are getting put in pretty much as soon as I get an email from the lab. There's 2 tabs on the Google Drive document, the sampling confirmation and then the results tab. So click on the results tab, find your name, and you'll find the lab results. As long as I've gotten the email and I've put it in there, you'll find the lab results for your site. The data is being entered into SWIMS by the State Lab of Hygiene, but just like Chris said with Ken's question, that you are not associated to that site unless it's actually your general WAVE site that you're doing other stuff at. So if you are interested in having a project set up at a site that you're just doing total phosphorus monitoring at, let me know. It's a really easy fix, and then you'll be able to see that data in SWIMS instead of off of the Google Drive document.
Great. Anybody else have questions? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your patience as we got this set up. I'm very, very, very excited, and since I know Molly's on, I want to give huge kudos to Molly McDonald for all her efforts, and to Jeannie Shear and Lindsay for work to create these forms and to work with the Sudhir, our programmer. It's awesome. It's awesome to have it done, and I'm really excited that we have all our data going into one database and the potential for having our station reports at the end of the year being auto-generated through SWIMS. When the database is in the production server, which is that final step that means that we all can use it from whatever computer we're sitting at, I will let you know the same way I've been announcing these webinars. We'll put it on Facebook. I will also put it on that database page where there's the information about registering a site and getting the WAMS ID. Hopefully it will be in the next week or so that we can actually tell you it's live and you can enter your data, but it could be a little bit longer than that. I'm not quite sure how long it takes to go from development into production. So I'm looking now at Joe's question. So the old WAVE database used to calculate percent saturation. Yes, so what is happening at this point? This database will not calculate percent saturation. So we are going to use the manual way of determining percent saturation, which is actually what you are given in your methods is actually from Michigan. So it's not based on the elevation that you're actually at. It's a general idea of what the percent saturation is, assuming that we are similar in elevation to streams in Michigan. So we do not currently ask, that would be kind of a future plan, is that we could actually ask everybody what their elevation of their site is, or just know it because the database is that smart to know from your GPS coordinates what the elevation is, and it could actually calculate it. But for right now, it's going to be either, if you used a meter, you're going to have calibrated that meter for the elevation that you're using the meter at, or if you're using the HOC kit, you're going to use that paper form to estimate what percent saturation is. All right, anybody else with questions? All right, fabulous. Thanks everybody so much for getting on. We will do two things. We'll share this webinar, and we're also going to put together hopefully a pretty succinct little video demonstrating how to go through the data entry on the website. It might take a couple weeks to get those up, but we will do that. We'll also be, again, letting you know when the production server is live and that you can actually use the forms and enter your results. So thanks everybody. Be safe monitoring. Thank you for monitoring, and we'll get some communication to you.